Imagine backing out of your driveway, dropping the shifter into drive, and feeling a violent rhythmic thud radiate right up through your seat. You press the accelerator, but the tachometer just screams toward redline, while the heavy chassis coasts forward like you are dragging a boat anchor through wet mud. You smell the catastrophe before you truly understand it. That acrid, dark, burnt electronics odor seeping through the floorboards, thick enough to taste. You just lost your automatic transmission at 85,000 miles. The service advisor at the polished dealership desk will stare at his monitor, give you a practice shrug, and tell you it is just a stroke of random bad luck. That is a mathematically calculated lie. They are actively covering up the sealed-for-life fluid myth. They are waiting patiently to hit you with the monolithic valve body extortion trick. And they are desperate to keep you completely blind to the dipstick deletion agenda. Welcome to a modern engineering crime I call the thermal strangulation loop. Let's examine the anatomy of a deliberate failure. You walk into the dealership and the showroom seduction begins. The salesman taps the sleek hood of a modern SUV and brags about the zero-maintenance drivetrain, promising 100,000 miles of uninterrupted mechanical freedom. It sounds like a technological miracle, a vehicle that simply takes care of itself while you focus on the daily commute. But the engineering reality tells a darker story. The hidden choke point is the absolute removal of the transmission fluid dipstick. They completely eliminated your physical ability to monitor the lifeblood of your own drivetrain, locking you out of the casing with proprietary fill plugs and specialized temperature gauge requirements. They sealed the box and threw away the key. Here is how the physics actually punish you. Inside that sealed aluminum case, a densely packed planetary gear set generates massive, continuous friction every single time it shifts. The factory-fill synthetic fluid immediately begins to degrade under the intense heat, shearing down its protective viscosity on a microscopic, molecular level. Because there is no external filtration system to catch the heavy debris, microscopic steel shavings from the deteriorating clutch packs suspend directly in that liquid. Your premium lubricant is systematically transformed into a high-speed abrasive slurry, pumped relentlessly through the sensitive hydraulic galleries. By mile 60,000, that fluid does not look like the bright cherry syrup they poured at the factory. It looks and smells like black, rotting coffee grounds, thick with suspended metal dust. That toxic abrasive eats the precision solenoids alive, scoring the aluminum bores until the hydraulic pressure bleeds out internally. The gear shifts become sloppy, the clutches slip, and the heat builds exponentially. They know exactly what happens when you trap heat inside a closed system. It triggers the thermal strangulation loop. The math hits you when the warranty clock expires. You bring the shuddering vehicle into the bay, and the service quote hits you for mid-four figures because the manufacturer refuses to sell individual internal components. They force you to buy the entire monolithic transmission assembly. Any veteran technician dragging a heavy steel toolbox across a cracked concrete floor will tell you they drill and tap the transmission pan to install a manual drain plug on their personal trucks the exact day the warranty expires. The degradation is entirely predictable. Perhaps you avoided the large trucks and bought a highly efficient daily commuter equipped with a continuously variable transmission. The showroom pitch is incredibly persuasive. They sell you on infinite, seamless gear ratios and an extra 3 miles per gallon. The test drive feels incredibly smooth, gliding down the asphalt like a golf cart on a sheet of polished glass. Then you look at the fundamental, cost-cutting architecture of the choke point. The system relies on a segmented steel push belt riding between two variable aluminum pulleys. It is literally heavy metal dragging hard against softer metal, held together by nothing but hydraulic tension. The tension required to keep that steel belt from violently slipping is immense. When you punch the gas pedal to merge aggressively onto a fast-moving highway, the hydraulic pump pressure spikes instantly. If there is a microscopic delay or a slight pressure loss in the system, that steel belt slips just a fraction of a millimeter. That instantaneous slip violently scores the polished aluminum pulley face. Once that perfectly smooth surface is scratched, it physically transforms. It acts exactly like a heavy-duty cheese grater grinding against the steel belt links. The chain reaction is catastrophic and irreversible. You hear a high-pitched, agonizing metallic whine, sounding exactly like a starved power steering pump begging for mercy. This is immediately followed by a violent, teeth-rattling judder that shakes the steering column completely out of your hands. The steel pushbelt shatters under the strain, exploding into 1,000 jagged metal shrapnel fragments and completely gutting the internal housing. Why would anyone trust a drivetrain that actively destroys its own components under normal, everyday acceleration? The dealer will not even attempt to rebuild the shattered wreckage. They simply order a massive crate replacement for your transmission, extracting enough cash from your wallet to purchase a completely functional used car on the private market. We push these lifeless hulks straight out to the back auction lot because touching a shredded CVT is a massive liability nightmare for any independent shop. The friction takes no prisoners. This brings us to the ultimate display of corporate arrogance. You purchase a heavy-duty rig explicitly equipped with a factory tow package. It features the massive reinforced grille, the aggressive badging, and the heavy-duty promise of hauling your camper straight over the steep grades of the Rocky Mountains. You paid a premium for industrial-grade capability. Tucked away entirely out of sight, spliced directly into the vital transmission cooler lines, is a tiny, fragile, plastic thermostatic bypass valve. Its only engineered purpose is to intentionally block the flow of cooling fluid until the transmission reaches an artificially high temperature, simply to shave a fraction of a percent off the corporate emissions profile. Inside that cheap plastic housing is a degrading wax pill. It is supposed to melt and physically open the fluid path to the heat exchanger when the temperature hits exactly 190 degrees. But the cheap wax degrades after thousands of thermal cycles. The internal retaining spring weakens and jams. The valve sticks completely, permanently shut. Your transmission fluid is now trapped, circulating endlessly inside the main gearbox, absorbing immense frictional heat without ever reaching the front cooling radiator. The digital temperature gauge on your dash suddenly spikes into the red zone. You smell boiling synthetic oil aggressively venting from the pressure breather tube, a harsh, toxic chemical stench that burns the back of your throat. Inside the casing, the intense thermal overload causes the internal friction plates to violently warp. The fibrous clutch material delaminates from the steel backing, and the entire assembly fuses together in a blackened, ruined stack. This isn't a random defect. It is a calculated sacrifice of your expensive hardware to satisfy an arbitrary regulatory benchmark. This engineered choke point is the final, inescapable stage of the thermal strangulation loop. A $50 plastic valve just successfully nuked a heavy-duty commercial transmission, leaving your family stranded on the gravel shoulder with a catastrophic repair bill that easily rivals a mortgage down payment. Look in the driveways of the guys who actually rebuild these complex gearboxes for a living, and you will consistently see older, pre-electronic iron that absolutely refuses to die. A cheap thermostat dictates your ruin. When the inevitable finally happens, and the flatbed tow truck drops your lifeless vehicle at the glowing service bay, the extraction protocol begins. The trap operates with ruthless efficiency. First, they run a proprietary diagnostic sweep that deliberately ignores obvious mechanical, where-to-blame a transient software glitch. Second, they flash the computer module and charge you 2 hours of diagnostic labor just to electronically mask the physical shutter. Third, they send you back on the road until the component finishes failing entirely outside the legal warranty window. Fourth, they hit you with the full unit replacement ultimatum, denying any prior knowledge of the structural flaw. You do not have to fund this racket. When you shop for your next vehicle, completely bypass the engineered fragility. Use this exact, phone screen simple counterstrike to protect your investment. Demand a traditional step gear automatic transmission. Verify the presence of a physical dipstick. Reject any vehicle utilizing a pushbelt CVT. Install a heavy-duty aftermarket fluid cooler. Pin the factory thermal bypass valve open. Drain and fill fluid every 30,000. The strategy relies entirely on your blind trust. The major manufacturers desperately want you to view your modern drivetrain as a magical, sealed black box that you are unqualified to understand. They rely entirely on your inherent fear of the wrench to keep their massively profitable service bays fully funded year after year. If you are ready to stop subsidizing these corporate engineering crimes, and you want to learn how to actively defend your machinery against planned obsolescence, hit the subscribe button.